Good afternoon. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to Westmoreland Congregational UCC. I am Amber Newroth, and it is my honor to be officiating today. We come to celebrate the life and mourn the death of Gail Fosler. We join in the protective shelter of God's healing love. This particular community has one thing in common. You all loved Gail. You all knew her in a unique way and loved her in your own unique way, and so we have come together as a congregation. This congregation will never gather again, and so we are here for that one purpose. And so this is our time. This is our time to feel however we feel, to grieve however we grieve, to be angry, to laugh, to love, to remember Gail. We do all of this trusting that we are God's people, and we are held today and every day in God's loving care. We gather conscious of the frailty of life, and we are here to comfort one another, to be together in community. And we remember that we are never alone, that God is always with us, comforting us. We know and trust the truth of Scripture that whether we live or whether we die, we belong to God. Please pray with me. Holy God, whose ways are not our ways, and whose thoughts are not our thoughts, send your Holy Spirit to be with us today, standing in for us, offering sighs when we need to sigh, and words when we need to speak, and tears when we need to cry. Heal our wounded hearts made heavy by our sorrow. Through the veil of our tears, assure us again that an ear has not heard, nor eye seen, nor human imagination envisioned all that you have prepared for your beloved people. Be with us today as we remember and grieve and celebrate Gail. Meet us where we are. Guide us through this worship service and beyond, helping us to hold Gail's legacy in our hearts today and always. Amen. And now I will invite Gail's grandnieces up to share some readings.
Hello everyone, I'm Eliana. I'm Gail's grandniece, and this is my time to share what she meant to me. Gail Fosler was, as you all know, exceptionally hardworking, kind, strong, funny, smart, and most importantly, a supportive friend and a very supportive family member. But there's so much that means more about her than that. Everyone knows that you can pick Gail out of a crowd by her laugh. A smile so big and a laugh so boisterous that it fills the entire room and you just can't help but laugh with her. Her laugh wasn't the only thing that was contagious. She had always had a positive attitude, her own flair and style, her passion for life, family, and love. She meant more to me than you all could imagine. She was a world traveler, an academic, and the most powerful woman I knew. And she always encouraged my mom, my sister, and I to be powerful women just like her. I am incredibly grateful for her support that she's given me throughout my life and my family, and the support from my family as well. I am grateful for the memories at High Point, which is my safest place in the whole world. Eating s'mores, making dinner together, boat adventures, silly board game fun, and most importantly, our Thanksgiving traditions. She shaped my devoted family values and she's supported my family through some of the hardest points of our life. Her love shined through any illness, complication, or hardship. If you needed Gail's help, she would back you up. Having someone that strong behind us meant so much comfort to our family. She was one of the most stable and constant role models in my life. Nothing beats pulling up to the driveway at High Point and being greeted by Scott and Gail and getting the warmest, safest, loving hug you could imagine. I'm so heartbroken to lose her, but she still lives on in many ways. I see her now joining Scott in the sunsets at High Point. I see her and my mom, my sister, and I. She lives on in the flowers and the butterflies at High Point. Her warmth lives next to the cozy fire on a chilly November's day, and her happy energy in the dock when the sun is shining and the waves gently crash upon the shore. So many places she has touched will forever have that unforgettable, loving, kind energy. In honor of her memory and love, I promise to live my life as she did, finding adventure and trying my best in all that I can do. She has made a lasting impact on everyone in this room and so many more. And so I encourage you to take what you learned from Gail and to use it regularly in your life as best you can. Explore nature and the world with friends, family members, and loved ones. Encourage and support yourself to always improve your career and achieve your dreams. Be generous, be kind, and most importantly, as she did, live life with the biggest laugh and a bigger smile. Thank you, Gail, for the gift of life that you've given us and for the memories you've brought to us. I love you.
Hi, I'm Delaney. I'm Gail's other grandniece. I wrote a poem, The Color Yellow. The color yellow symbolizes happiness, energy, optimism, and positivity. When I think about the color yellow, I think about the sun. I think about how bright and powerful it is. I think about how it lights up the whole world. Gail was bright like the sun. She would light up every room she was in, and she had the most powerful personality. When I think about Gail, I think about the color yellow. When I think about Gail, I think about how she used to sing to me and my sister before we went to sleep, and how comforting her hugs felt. I think about how she loved to dance, and how I never saw her without a smile on her face. Gail never failed to find positivity in every situation, or to show how much she cared about someone. When I think about the color yellow, I think about Gail. Gail made me feel loved and comforted. She made me feel happy, energized, and positive, just like the color yellow. Gail made me feel like the color yellow. I love you, Gail.
Lisa just shared with me that Grace played that just shortly before Gail passed. It had all the right notes. Thank you. That was a perfect expression of Gail. Thank you. So, life is a process of loving and letting go. If there's a single thread that connected Gail and myself in terms of our way of being in the world and our ability to relate intuitively with one another, it was likely this. Since the time we met, Gail has been a lot of things to me. My dad's date, his fiancée, his wife, my stepmom and mom, a 10K runner and fitness enthusiast, a numbers girl, a cancer survivor, all while bringing a healthy dose of Catholicism into my very waspy existence. So for me, there was a new permutation of living and loving when she came into the mix. As you know, these last few years have been extremely difficult. And the truth is, with the way things played out, there are many conversations with Gail and I never did get to have independent of my father. So while Gail was many things to me, and I to her, I'm sure, today I'd like to focus on this as being a friend. The first real substantive memory I have of Gail in my life was a long weekend in Ocean City. It was an annual event where Democrats gathered, had a crab feast, and I suppose there was likely some agenda setting for the year or some such thing. Since I was young, it was always just my dad and myself, but this one year, Gail started joining us. And as my dad would hobnob, she dutifully minded me and played the role of caretaker as we spent the afternoon meandering through different events and activities, eventually setting into a very happy period of playing Miss Pac-Man back at the hotel. She never tried to force anything and was more than game to play her part as we got to know each other in a somewhat unorthodox way. To be honest, we had a somewhat complicated relationship, but this, I think, was more of circumstance than demeanor. We actually were both pretty uncomplicated people, and of my three parents, I like to say that Gail was the normal one. And kids need normal, so I mean this as a compliment. Which isn't to say that she wasn't unique as an individual. She was. She had two strong-willed parents who had made their way to Southern California to build a new life. If I remember correctly, her mom, Helen, came from a hardscrabble background in Missouri, while her dad, Richard, was from Michigan with extensive time in Montana. And they instilled in her the values of hard work, shared sacrifice, and ingenuity. As she would explain to me later in life, she followed the thump-thump model of decision-making. That is, if your heart is going thump-thump, it's best to listen. I'm sure it's this can-do spirit that led her to buck her dad's wishes and study economics, making her way from Southern California to Chicago and New York, then to DC, with a little hybrid New York and DC to follow after that. All the while finding success in forays and fields that have been more conventionally held for men. With this said, following the thump-thump model requires more than strength, gumption, and fortitude. It also requires the capacity for tenderness. Lisa's husband, Mark, recently, or Mark, I didn't know who was speaking, so Mark, who you'll hear from in a bit, Mark recently shared with me an incredibly poignant story that echoed the story I wish I had been able to share with Gail before she passed. I had decided to canoe down the Mississippi River, as one does when they are young and naive, starting in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. I was immediately in way over my head, and things were not going my way. It was not like me to simply break down and call home, much less call home for help, but this time I did. My dad wasn't there, but Gail was. And while I don't remember quite what she said, she assured me that all was going to be okay. I'm really not sure how or why, but somehow it saved me. I think she understood that challenges, setbacks, and the unexpected are part of life, and it's not about overcoming them, but seeing your way to the other side. I made it another 3 weeks on the river, pulling out just short of St. Louis. Pro tip for life from Gail at this point. If at first you only hear your heart going pitter-pat before you get to the full thump-thump, that's probably when you should start paying attention. One of Gail's other gifts, of course, was with numbers. I'm sure Pete will speak much more amply to this than I ever could, but one story here. Growing up, there was a time when I'd like to study the baseball stats in Sunday's paper, often reading out all the ones I found interesting. Once at work, Gail's boss, a sports enthusiast, received quite the shock when he asked who was the league leader in batting average. Gail, not the sports nut, not only knew the answer, she was able to quote the precise average because apparently she was retaining all the numbers I was saying on Sunday mornings about subject matter that she had no other expertise in. But Gail did not get lost in the numbers. She was attentive to what they signified, indicated, and represented. In speaking about the undiscovered self and the journey that each of us must take in our life on the path of individuation, Carl Jung, who I think Gail introduced me to, Carl Jung once noted that if you pick up a collection of stones on a beach, weigh them all, and determine the average, there's not one of those stones in the group that will necessarily be the average. And so it doesn't make sense to treat them as such. It follows that it would make no more sense to do the same with ourselves, and Gail knew this instinctively, intuitively, in her soul. It speaks to how she related to me and to people in general, and I think what I admired about her most professionally and personally. Many summers of my formative years were spent with Gail, my dad, and her parents on lakes and rivers in Montana, which not only have some of the best skipping stones in the world, but serve as one of the best places to skip them. Smooth, well-polished stones, ready to skim across flat, tranquil surfaces, not 3 to 5 times, but 10, 20, 30 times, seamlessly endless skips from one spot to the next. Thinking about this the other day, I came to realize the sort of impact Gail made and leaves with all of us. When you release yourself into life and touch lightly on the surface, leaving ripples through shared moments of contact, there's an economy of motion, a freedom of energy, and a spontaneity to the whole enterprise. You can't quite predict how each moment of contact will lead you to the next, but you can follow your intuition and have faith in the path that will unfold. Gail, I love you. We will always cherish and love you and the ripple effects you've shared with us and leave behind as we continue to live and to love and begin to let go.
I heard about Gail Fosler several weeks before I actually met her. 2 Senate staffers mentioned that Henry Bellman, the ranking member of the Senate Budget Committee, had just hired a Wall Street economist. I was immediately impressed because that meant she'd taken a big pay cut to work in the minority on the committee. A few weeks later, she called up and asked me questions about tax cuts and how much they cost and the income distribution and so on. And then after several calls, she finally said, "Hey, can I come over and, let's meet?" And I said, "Sure, come on over." She showed up with a 6'8" Georgetown University varsity basketball player intern. And needless to say, both were impressive. We worked together regularly until one day in December of 1980, after the Reagan Revolution election, and that, of course, flipped the Senate, she called and said, "Hey, Pete, we're in the majority. I can hire a revenue economist. You know everybody. Who should I hire?" So I thought for a minute, and I said, "Yeah, great, congratulations." I mentioned a few people at the Congressional Budget Office, Brookings, Treasury, and then I stopped for a second and blurted out, "Hey, what about me?" And she said, "Really, would you take it?" And I said, "Look, you can't pay me anymore, I'm maxed. You can't earn any more than a member of Congress. But I gotta have the parking space." Anybody who's worked on the Senate side knows how tough it is to park over there. And the rest was history. She was a joy to work for. And unlike some Senate staff, she had no problem with me working one-on-one with the chairman, Domenici. I don't recall any time she ever really objected to my suggestions, and plenty of times she sent me on a more productive course. There's one meeting that stands out late January of 1981, just before President Reagan's first budget was wrapped up. Senator Domenici, as Chief of Staff Steve Bell, Gail, and myself met at 10 p.m. one night with Dave Stockman, Council of Economic Advisors Chair Marty Feldstein, Alan Greenspan, Murray Wiedenbaum, in Stockman's office in the old executive office building. We actually debated Rosie's scenario, which looking back on it seems ridiculous, but it showed huge economic growth and flat interest rates, which no economist would ever agree to except Larry Kudlow. And I had to throw that in. But the writing was on the wall. Stockman left, went over, met with the president, came back and said, hey, you guys got to get on board. We're insisting you support everything. And we walked out and helped pass it. And then she led the efforts over the next 15 years to raise taxes on the wealthy and to cut spending. And guess what? We actually balanced the budget in fiscal 98, 99, 2000, and 2001, which hardly anybody remembers anymore. Then she went on to become the chief economist at the Conference Board, where she was, so well regarded all around the world as one of the top U.S. economists. And she also served on a whole bunch of corporate boards. So, she knew how drug pricing worked at Merck and how to price tractors at Caterpillar and, things that are kind of useful real-world things for an economist. Everyone who knew her valued her economic insights and her wonderful demeanor. Late in 1981, Gail's personal life rose up. I pick up a copy of Human Events, the really conservative right-wing newspaper, had this war headline, Fosler marries Democrat. And over the next many years, as I got to, Gail, Jacqueline and I would go over and have dinner and talk to Scott and Gail all the time, and they'd come over to our house. We came to learn how totally in love and devoted Gail and Scott were to each other. She got involved in local Montgomery County politics and helped elect Scott to be the mayor of Chevy Chase and then 2 terms on the Montgomery County Council. And, just a wonderful relationship there. And be sure to walk out this door and take a look at this incredible picture of Gail and Scott at sunset down on the shore. It says everything about their relationship. And, I'm going to miss her.
Hello. My name is Burl Clark, and I was Gail's assistant for 17 years. Gail would often brag to people that that's longer than most marriages last. I began working for her in 2005 when she was executive vice president and chief economist at the Conference Board. Once I started there, I found out that people were calling her Murphy Brown. For people who don't remember or are too young to remember, Murphy Brown was a sitcom in the 80s, and one of the running gags was that Murphy Brown had a different secretary every single week, which apparently was Gail's reputation. I don't know how much is office legend, but I'm told that more than one person quit after the first day. One woman apparently quit on her lunch hour. But I never found her difficult to work with. Demanding, yes. And I soon learned I had to follow her around with a notepad to catch all the ideas, plans, schemes, and tasks that would flow from her mind. It was always a mystery to me how someone like me, with a background in art and theater, would be able to work so well with someone whose area of expertise I really had no understanding of, and still don't, I might add. But somehow we found a mutual connection over the quality of our work, what we considered professional and excellence. She often compared our relationship to thunder and lightning, who were a couple of Labradors that lived next to her that she loved to talk about. Lightning, I'm assuming by the name, was the rambunctious one, always eager to investigate something new, to start a new adventure, to get into trouble, and that was Gail, always rushing ahead with new ideas, new projects, new adventures, a new line of inquiry. Thunder was apparently the dog who would hold back, use caution, as if to say, I don't know about this lightning. And that was me, who had to remind her that there were things like logistics and resources and timelines and even feasibility to be considered. It turned out to be a healthy balance. And of course, it's hard to talk about Gail without mentioning Scott. Those of us who knew them knew that they were so in love, it was practically disgusting. She worked primarily in New York and went back to Chevy Chase on the weekends. And on the occasions that Scott would come up to New York, it was as if two love-struck teenagers were seeing each other for the first time, almost every time. And when his health began to fail, I watched as she took over as his caretaker without question and without resentment. And she continued giving and loving until his last moments. Her intellect and achievements were obviously enormous. But what always struck me and what I'll always remember about her was her kindness. She commanded respect simply by showing respect and kindness to everyone. I used to think when people said things like, she'll always be with us, she'll live on in our memories, that was just something people said to make themselves feel better. And not to get too metaphysical here, but if you think about this in terms of karma or in terms of cause and effect, it begins to make sense. If you look around today and see how many lives she touched so deeply, the actions and initiatives she started, the profound effect she had on people's lives, these things truly live on today. The things she started continue today, and knowing her has changed us. She truly does live on in those that she touched. A lyric from a recent Gary Newman song has been hitting me hard lately, perhaps because Gail often referred to me as old friend. Well, old friend, she would say, another great meeting, or well, old friend, another year gone by. The lyric goes, your journey is at an end, old friend, and mine is filled with memories. Obviously, she left me with a lifetime of memories. But the one memory that stands out above the rest was one of the last times that I saw her. She was in Johns Hopkins Hospital shortly before she was returned home to Chevy Chase. And by this time, her words had left her. She could only say yes or no or oh. Occasionally a word like delicious after eating, which she relished. But when it was time to go, she looked me in the eye and she said, we love you. We really, really love you. It just about broke my heart. But it's the memory that I'll always cherish, because in that moment, when her body and her words were failing her, she still somehow found the ability to give me this message. Even in that moment, she was still giving and still loving. I miss her so much.
Good afternoon. For those of you who might not know me, I'm Mark Kelly, and I'm married to Gail's niece, Lisa. And I have the unenviable task of following all those wonderful speakers today. After listening to my two daughters speak, I'm reminded of a W.C. Fields line, to paraphrase, essentially said, never follow a kid. And I really feel I know what he means now. I met Gail almost 30 years ago when Lisa and I first started dating. I loved Gail Fosler from the start. Over the first few years of our relationship, Gail changed, or maybe to be more accurate, saved my life. Because Gail went out of her way to show me loyalty and love, and to convince me that I deserved joy in my life. Now, during these early years, I felt that Gail's attention really made me special. As the years went on, I realized I wasn't special at all. That's just how Gail treats family. And when I use the term family in context of Gail Fosler, I'm casting a very wide net that goes far beyond lines of blood or marriage. Family to Gail was just about anyone she encountered on a regular basis. If Gail liked you, you were family. It was the same if you cut her hair, her lawn, or in Peter's case, took her back and forth to the airport about 1,000 times, or in my case, married her niece. We were all family to Gail. Gail, to be sure, was special. Her list of accomplishments long. Her professional accomplishments, the MBA from NYU, chief economist with the U.S. Senate Budget Committee, former member of the Council of Foreign Affairs, the Bretton Woods Committee, sat on many boards like Caterpillar, Baxter, chief economist for the Conference Board, chairman of the board for Deschner, and then eventually founder of Gail Fosler Group. But impressive as this list is, this really has nothing to do with what made Gail so special. It was how Gail made people feel. Gail made you feel good because when you were with Gail, you really felt like you mattered. This is how she was able to touch so many lives, and this is why this loss is so hard. Because few people in this world have this ability that came so naturally to Gail. Gail was adopted. She had a happy childhood. She was adopted by good parents, Dick and Helen, that allowed her to feel safe, loved, and supported. And she carried those feelings on a DNA level throughout her entire life. It was the foundation of her ever-present optimism. And there has never been a more glass-half-full person than Gail Fosler. Gail was devoted to her adopted families, first to her parents, and then to the Foslers. When Gail smiled, it was 100% real. When she hugged you, every hug was with everything she had. When you made her laugh, everyone in the house and probably neighboring houses knew it because she laughed with her whole body. I will never forget the first time I heard her laugh, and I'll never forget the last time I saw her smile. Gail was all in when it came to living life. To use some basketball vernacular, she left it all on the court, day in and day out. And what a lesson that is for all of us. Gail actually lived her life as though every day might be her last. I think this is because Gail knew what was important. She could find joy in so many things. Little things, like spending the entire day antique shopping when she had absolutely no intention of buying anything. Or laboring for hours and weeks and sometimes months to find the perfect fabric for a throw pillow. but big things too, like getting Grandpa Howard to High Point for one last Thanksgiving, or attending her great-niece's 16th birthday party in Chicago. Gail showed up, and all these things were important to her. She was present in the moment all the time. No moment was too big or too small. We're all damn lucky to have had Gail in our lives. Pardon the language, Reverend, but I actually toned that down. I wish it could have been for a little while longer, but I'm not going to complain because I know Gail wouldn't. WWGD, what would Gail Fosler do, has already become a very common acronym used by Lisa and myself. And I'd suggest you all consider working that into your daily lexicons as well, because if you do, you'll find your life to be a little fuller and happier and joyous. Lisa and I always used to say Gail was a bright light. And I don't mean just light up a room bright, because that alone would be an understatement. Gail shined like a star, as described by Delaney in her poem. And I understand that it can take many, many years for the light of a star to reach us here on earth. So often, we're seeing the light of a star long after it's gone dark. And I'd like to think that even though she's gone, those of us fortunate enough to have basked in Gail's light will continue to see, enjoy, and draw comfort from that light for many years to come.
Cathedral bells were tolling, and our hearts sang on. Was it the spell of Paris, or the April dawn? Who knows if we shall meet again? But when the morning chimes ring sweet again, sweet again, I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In the small cafe, the park, across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer stay, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you
Thank you so much. What a beautiful, beautiful sung tribute. And as we have already heard this afternoon, so many moving tributes to Gail and her legacy. And we've heard over and over that Gail was the kind of person who was just easy to like. In every area of her life, in her family, in her career, people enjoyed being with her. She created family and community everywhere she went with strength and grace. As we've also heard, Gail had a great love for one particular person, her husband Scott. And I have heard from so many people that they loved being around Gail and Scott because they so clearly loved each other, and they loved being together and loved life. Scott was definitely a vital part of the life that Gail built, but she was the great visionary and architect of that love and that life and of her work. She loved people, and she showed up for them. She always made time for important events, as we have heard, like birthdays and graduations. It was as if there was nowhere else she wanted to be. She hosted people in her home, making people feel known and loved with that beautiful smile. Gail's legacy is that she loved people, and she wanted the best for people. And that is what her career and economics meant to her: more good for more people. And she devoted her life to that. More good for more people. As we have heard from each friendship, from each work relationship, from each family, Gail leaves a legacy of a great deal of good for a great deal more people. It's that legacy of love that brings us together to say goodbye to Gail now. Like Gail, I am also a Southern Californian, which is the best place to be from, just ask one of us. And Gail's talent for blessing others reminds me so much of another Southern Californian lady, my grandmother, who passed away herself a few years ago. At her memorial, I read these words from our faith tradition, written by another preacher who loved people, the Apostle Paul. He wrote, "For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I am fully known." I personally think that there is no better description of what we hope death is. Knowing pure love, clearly seeing face to face, because nothing now is in the way. Those words are so comforting to me because there is so much in this life that we only see dimly. We don't know why we suffer things like cancer. We don't understand why this family has had to suffer this double loss. And we often move through our grief blindly. Sometimes we might even feel alone or as if God has forgotten us. But Paul's words give us hope, because right now we only know in part. There's more to come, and then we will know fully, even as we are fully known. And I think that Gail believed that. I like to think of Gail now knowing fully what she only got to experience in part in this life. I like to think of her smile at being reunited with Scott. I like to think of her seeing face to face. I pray that whatever burdens that she carried are washed away, because she can see so clearly now. And I hope that we all will remember her and honor her by loving people the way that she did. More good for more people. Amen. And please join your hearts together with me in this closing prayer. Holy God, we thank you for Gail's life and for this community gathered who loved her and who will always remember her. We are grateful for all of your blessings that Gail shared with her family, her friends, and her country, blessings that we will carry forward in her memory and in her honor. We grieve Gail's illness and we mourn her loss. We see in the mirror darkly. We ask your abiding presence with us, O God, guiding us through these days of grief. Help us to support one another in kindness and in openness, as Gail would. We also ask for your loving care for Gail, for Scott, and for all of us. Hold us in your love and grace until we all see you face to face. Amen. And now we will close with some more music, and then the family would like to invite all of us downstairs to join in a reception following the beautiful music today. Thank you all for being here.